Hey guys, it is Nikki, and in honor of Camp Nano, which is right around the corner, I decided to give you guys a little glimpse into some of the prep that I'm doing for Camp Nano, including one thing that I've actually never tried before. Scene cards. Scene cards. Scene cards! So, scene cards. Sounds fairly self-explanatory. There's definitely some leeway in what you do with them. I saw a template online that was very specific. It had what happened in that scene, maybe which characters were involved, what the character or scene arc was, which I think is awesome. For me, I didn't have to be that specific because I wasn't planning a novel from scratch. I was sort of hyper-analyzing a draft that I already had. So I didn't need to have all those things written down because I could just look at what a scene was and know, okay, this is the part where these two get in a huge fight and this is important to his arc because it's where his descent into madness starts. Or some such. That did make things easier and faster for me because I didn't have to go into that much detail on each individual card. It also allowed me to make the cards smaller. As you can see, they're really not very big. It still felt like a pretty long and tedious process. And just so you can see what my card making and organizing process looked like, roll film. First, I had to cut out a bajillion of those little cards. But don't worry, I used some scrap card that we've had lying around forever and was probably never going to get used, so I am not a tree killer. The draft that I'm working with has 72 chapters, so initially I had 72 cards in my head, but then I realized partway into it that each chapter has multiple points of view and perspective scenes in it, and I wanted to outline all of those individually, not just the larger scenes, because it's the individual character moments that I want to be rearranging and tweaking. So I ended up with 88 cards in the end, which is a lot, but it fit into 11 beautifully symmetrical rows of 8, so all is well. I wrote out a super brief description of what goes on in that scene on each card, and on the back I put the chapter names so that the multiple perspectives that fit into one chapter can be grouped together by what's on the back. And as I went, if there was something that I knew I wanted to change in a scene or an adjustment that I already know that I want to make, I made a tiny note of that too. So on this card, for example, it is a reunion between a father and son. I made the note, less sappy, more information about character B. I also color-coded them by the character whose perspective each scene is from, because is color coding really optional? No. No, it's not. Once I had all those scenes laid out and in order, I had sort of a chronological map of the entire story from beginning to end, all the different character perspectives. Every single time the perspective changes, I had all that sort of laid out in front of me. And that bird's eye view did what I was hoping it would do. It kind of helped me to visualize the scenes that I really like or think are absolutely necessary, and the ones that I'm not really into and maybe haven't ever been into. Just to be absolutely sure, I took it a step further. I made 3 categories: yes, and ew. And then I did a rapid fire sorting session, throwing my scenes into the category I thought they fit into. I didn't put a ton of thought into it. I sort of just went with what my visceral gut reaction was to each scene, which I think is good because it gives me a taste of how I implicitly feel about each of the scenes. Some of them I felt implicitly like this is necessary. Other ones it was like, ugh, I've never been happy with this, put it in the ew pile. Now, admittedly, my 3 categories are a little bit ambiguous in that I'm not sure exactly what they mean. Does yes mean no changes need to be made, it's perfect as it is? If that's the case, then none of them would fit into the yes pile. But on the flip side, does ew mean that I just delete the scene? Because then I'd lose half my story, so that doesn't really make sense. What I ended up determining was that the 3 categories basically just help me to gauge how happy I am with each scene and how much change and editing they're going to need. So for the yes pile, that would probably be the scenes that I am most happy with, or the scenes that I think are absolutely crucial and are going to stay roughly in the same shape even when I rewrite them. Because I've already decided I'm rewriting the whole thing. So nothing is going to stay as is, not even the things in the yes pile. For example, the card that says murder, which I could explain, but I'm not going to. This one is in the yes pile, because even though I plan to rewrite it, probably add some detail and color and ideas that weren't in the first draft, This scene is super, super, super crucial to the story. It absolutely needs to happen. It needs to happen at the time that it happens. And so a lot of it is going to stay the same. Even though the way that the scene unfolds might look a little different, the scene itself needs to remain intact. So it's going in the yes pile. But this one, the scene where the villain is creepily thinking about his unrequited love, is in the ew pile because it needs a ton of work, and I'm basically just going to take a chainsaw to it and rebuild it from the ground up to try and reduce the insane cliché-ness of it. After sorting the scenes, which are now not in order, I marked them all with different colored markers so that I know what category I put them into, and then I put them back in order just because it's a lot easier to work with them when I can see the story chronologically, especially when I'm trying to now draft a new outline for it. I need to see those scenes as they actually happened. I also made some extra blue cards for the scenes that I want to add, things that did not exist at all in the earlier story. I already had a bunch of those, so I threw those in, but then as I was thinking about it more and more, I was coming up with more, and I think I'm going to continue to do that. As I come up with scenes, I'll slip them into the outline so that I have a visual of the things that need to be introduced to the story or weaved in where they weren't before. And with that done, it was time for a hardcore brainstorming session. I'd really like to be able to just jump right into drafting when the month starts, but I also don't want to rush it because I know in the past I've decided to just start the writing before I did the planning, which works for things like, YA contemporary. Sometimes you don't need to have a super clear plan, but I found with this story and this world in particular, and with fantasy in general, it's so complex. You have so many moving parts, so many things that you need to weave together. For me anyway, outlining is kind of important. I have to say though, I'm super excited about it. Like, the ideas that have been flowing from the Lord in the past few days have been amazing, and I'm just so excited to get them rolling, to integrate these ideas, to start writing them. One thing that I am very nervous about, because I've struggled with this a lot in the past, and with this project in particular, as I've written multiple drafts of this one and also written a couple drafts of a sequel to but never finished it, is the whole rewriting idea. In the past, when I have edited a draft, I've kind of just read it over and changed an existing draft, maybe really hacked up the wording or tried to feather the new into the old and make it mix. The problem with that is that you can get really stuck in the old. You're in this mindset that you're just sort of elevating the old to a new level instead of making something entirely new based on the old. That's a problem because you end up with a draft that basically looks exactly like the one before it, just a tiny bit different. If I relied on that process to get me from draft 1 to final perfect draft, it would just take 1,000 years. That said, there is safety in using what you already have. You're not starting from scratch, and for me, I'm always scared that what if I don't like the way I put it the second time as much as the way I put it the first time? What if there are things in the first one that I really like? What if I like the way this unfolded and it just doesn't happen the same way when I try to redo it? And I feel like that is a legitimate fear. Thankfully though, since I've let this story sit for a while, the writing is even outdated. The way that I would attack the actual prose in this upcoming draft will be totally different from the way that I attacked it in my original drafts. I want to kind of get away from the style that I was in. I want to sort of loosen up a bit in my prose. I had a lot of very strict rules about the words that I was allowed to use, the phrasing that I was allowed to use. I really want to get away from that. So that almost helps me to make my decision because I couldn't rely on those old excerpts. I couldn't take a chunk from the old and drop it into the new because they wouldn't fit anymore. It's kind of like that verse about old wineskins and new wine, or new wine in old bottles or something. It doesn't end well. With that in mind, I'm both excited and terrified to just start with a blank page in front of me, not editing something I already have, not taking the wording that I already have and just making a few tweaks here and there and trying to cram details between lines that I had already written. No, this will be a brand new start, blank page, scary, exciting, all the feels, but the scene cards have definitely been helpful. Would I do scene cards for everything? I am not sure, because personally I felt like it was a lot of work, and even though I really liked having that visual, for me it's almost just as helpful to write it out on paper, just in a notebook, to go through each scene, and I sort of write my thought process. If I scroll out, okay, this is the scene where these two people get in a fight, do I like this, do I not like this, nah, I think it's a little much, and I can just sort of hash out my own thoughts on the paper instead of going through all the work of like cutting out cards. And I realized that you can do things like that digitally too. But again, it seems like a lot of work for something that I could just do with a pen and my notebook. I think I'm going to keep my cards laid out the way they are right now, and as I continue to brainstorm, I will adjust. I might even make a new set for my new outline once I have something nailed down, but I might just keep that in my notebook instead. I'm sort of undecided at this point. Again, it does seem like a lot of work, so it kind of depends on how much time and motivation I have. It was definitely beneficial. I thought it was fun. I like color coding things. And in the future, I think I would be a little more organized in how I actually set up the cards. So instead of just having what the scene is about and maybe some little tweaks that I think of, I could organize each card to have a spot for, okay, this is what it's about. These are the things that I don't like about it. These are the things that I do like about it. These are the things that if I could change something, just make a tweak, what would I do? I did sort of do a little bit of that, but if I tried scene cards again, I think I would use a template from online or make my own template and hopefully have a more organized visual. I have a long way to go as far as building this story and figuring out the exact outline for how I want it to unfold, but I've come a long way in a very short time. The ideas are coming fast and furious. I'm really trying to record them all and make sure I don't forget anything, and I'm really looking forward to this Camp Nano. Thank you guys for watching this video, getting a little glimpse into some of the prep that I've been doing, something that was new to me. Maybe it's not new to you and you're a scene card veteran, in which case, if you have advice or if there's something I did totally wrong, feel free to let me know. I sort of just improvised and made up my own system, but if you have a system that really works for you, I would love to hear it. I'd love it if you would subscribe to the channel so we can help each other in this writer journey, and I will see you guys at Camp Nano. Do not forget to spend some time in the clouds today.